Welcome to the PAPO Podcast, your weekly dose of podcast recommendations. I'm your host, Mary Jane Rewa, and boy do I have some pretty punchy poddies for you today. I talk music, I talk food, wine, and the media. So many of the things I love talking about. Time is precious, so let's get into this week's recommendations. Today's first recommendation is focused squarely on something I love dearly and indulge in with great pleasure. That thing is wine, and the podcast's name is Wineface. Wineface is hosted by Helen Johannesson, a sommelier and owner of Helen's Wines in LA. Helen is an incredibly engaging authority on all things wine, and the podcast serves as an educational resource for the perhaps less qualified of us. Those who are curious about wine, who might want to be more informed about wine, who are looking to make savvier purchasing decisions when buying wine, or who simply want to feel more comfortable when ordering wine in restaurants. Wine is a global commodity, and so Wineface takes the listener all over the world. Not only is it a podcast that informs and entertains, it also acts as a virtual tour guide, teleporting us to parts of the world we can really only dream about visiting given the current situation. Johannesson takes us to wine regions from across the globe, from the old world to the new, explaining in just enough detail the various characteristics of the regions, what to look for in wines from those regions. She provides the names of notable winemakers, discusses winemaking styles, draws attention to the relevant grape varietals, requisite tasting notes, and she notably and very helpfully aids with pronunciation where necessary. Her style is learned but supremely relaxed, and this is emphasized by her use of language. It is relatable, it's creative, and completely and utterly lacking any of the pretense or arrogance often associated with the topic of wine and wine experts. It's a great entry point for exploring the subject of wine and is a true joy to listen to. Episodes run around 20 to 30 minutes long, just enough time to enjoy at least one little glass of wine while you listen. So in the words of Rihanna, pour it up and pop it on. Now, if the previous recommendation leaves you thinking about a deep luscious red or a summery blush rosé, I apologize, as today's second recommendation is about to frog stomp its way into your consciousness in the form of the Spotify original podcast, Who is Daniel Johns? In Who is Daniel Johns? Daniel Johns, the notoriously private musician known for fronting Silverchair, Disassociates and Dream, among other solo projects and collaborations, opens up like never before. He goes deep into his experiences as a young kid making massive waves in the global music market, his creative process, his mentors and collaborators, his music idols, and, surprisingly, his personal life. It is a strikingly captivating series. Not only are we invited into John's own world, hearing of his experiences direct from the proverbial horse's mouth, but we are equally as privileged to hear the thoughts and opinions of some of the people who have shared experiences with John's along the way. From ex-wife Natalie Imbruglia to contemporary Billy Corgan, legendary musician, composer, and maestro Van Dyke Parks, and Silverchair's ex-manager John Watson, and this barely scratches the surface. Each episode in this podcast is packed full of anecdotes, perspectives, stories, insights, laughs, and reflections into spaces and times way beyond most of us saw from the outside looking in. And so why has Daniel Johns, after all of this time, decided to do this podcast? Well, simply it seems to promote his creative genius, or in his own words, it's a good vessel to release art. Available now on Spotify, this 5-episode series is a trip down memory lane. It's a lesson on the price of fame. It holds a mirror up to relationships. It provides unique insight into the mind of a musical genius, and it's really, really good. Now, in my opinion, The Fold is one of the best podcasts coming out of New Zealand. It's hosted by Duncan Grieve, the founder and managing editor of The Spin-Off, a media brand and content agency based out of Auckland, New Zealand. In this podcast, Grieve interviews the movers, the shakers, the creators, and the big decision makers across the entire New Zealand media landscape. His roster of guests is equally as impressive as it is diverse. He talks to independent media players behind the likes of Shit You Should Care About, to Janet Wilson, the former press secretary to Judith Collins, leader of the opposition. He covered the $1 sale of stuff.co.nz to editor Sinead Boucher and the eventual very unfortunate demise of Bauer Media in the New Zealand market. He spoke to Metro editor Henry Oliver, its art director Calvin So, and food editor Jean Tang about how they revitalised Metro magazine, one of the casualties of the Bauer Media closure. He emphasises and shines a light on issues around representation in the media, the all-important funding that goes into New Zealand broadcasting and media, and he talks to people like Vodafone's CEO Jason Paris about ethical advertising. I could go on, but hopefully I've given you enough of an idea to let your curiosity take you on a wee journey. If it isn't already clear, Grieve doesn't shy away from the difficult topics nor from asking the difficult questions. The conversations are honest, the subject matter important, the timing relevant, and each episode is relentlessly interesting. Because of this, The Fold has established itself, in my eyes, as a living and breathing recent history of New Zealand media and broadcasting, and we, the fortunate recipients of this rich resource. Episodes are between 30 to 60 minutes long and are uploaded a little sporadically, but on balance, it seems weekly. Just to be certain, remember to subscribe and turn on the notifications to ensure you don't miss any new episodes. For today's final recommendation, let's head over to the Sparkful, a wildly fun and slightly wacky podcast on the absolute delight and pleasure of food. I stumbled upon this podcast last year and it's become one of my go-to easy listening podcasts ever since. What initially got me hooked on this podcast was its Mission Impossible series, where host Dan Pashman and a couple of his mates, Evan Kleiman and Francis Lamb, set out on an adventure to invent a, wait for it, new pasta shape. Now, I love pasta, so I found this incredibly fascinating. The entire process is documented over 5 surprisingly enlightening and entertaining episodes. It's a jolly good time. But the Sparkful is more than Mission Impossible. It, in its own words, is not for foodies, it's for eaters, and the regular episodes are a real testament to that tagline. In the Sparkful, Pashman covers wide-ranging topics and speaks to a broad range of people involved in or tangential to the food industry. His guests have included Great British Bake Off contestants, iconic musicians, food writers, chefs, doctors, and a whole heap more. Pashman and his guests discuss themes ranging from cooking techniques to eating in public as a fat person, from food and movies to the widely publicised reckoning at Bon Appetit, and everything in between. It is all of these things that make the Sparkful a real pleasure to listen to. Episodes run around 30 to 45 minutes long and are uploaded weekly on Mondays. Thank you for making it through this, the 3rd episode of the PAPO Podcast. You are a champion. All of the podcasts mentioned in today's episode will be linked in the show notes below. If you have any feedback, please get in touch. Information on how to contact me will also be in the show notes. And if you have any recommendations of your own, please fire them through to me. I'm always looking for something new to pop on. The music you hear in this episode was sourced through Uppbeat, the artist is Sensho, and the track is called Glow. See you next week.